Hello, I'm David Schneier, and welcome to the Schneier Show. In today's episode, we have a very special episode, actually, very special topic. If some of you from school know me as that guy who's weirdly obsessed with the Richard Nixon, you don't know why, because in your mind, the best president is either Ronald Reagan or Donald Trump if you go to my school for some weird reason. But actually, me and August are here to tell you that it's really Richard Nixon's probably more based than both of them. And that's just our deeply held belief. So I have August Wall here on the Schneier Show, and we'll be
Hi, it's
discussing.
yeah,
Yeah, we'll be
great to be here. It's great to be
great
here.
to have you.
Yeah, great
We'll be
honor.
we'll be discussing Richard Nixon. So I just want to jump right in with a Nixon quote, actually, on
All
my
right,
phone.
let's
I
do it.
really like this because I'll tell you a story. I was at a John Birch Society meeting in seventh grade. It's just out of curiosity. If you don't know what they are, they're a far right or conspiracy theory organization. Not QAnon, but a step down, but still kind of in that direction. And they believed that Richard Nixon was part of the Illuminati. The reason why they figured this is because they said that Richard Nixon was part of the Council on Foreign Relations. And this is a whole other uh, thing. So I never really thought too much about Richard Nixon, but me being the populist that I am, there's this quote, and I love it so much. It's the press is the enemy, the press is the enemy, the press is the enemy, the establishment is the enemy, the professors are the enemy, the professors are the enemy. Write that on the blackboard 100 times and never forget it. And that's Richard Nixon right there. And so, I think that's just very accurate, very, I think, also kind of a foretelling of what things, to come. But
I would absolutely agree. I think that in our modern era, I think it was a German philosopher who once said that the children, he who controls the children control the future. Uh, interesting, interesting German philosopher who said that once, but doesn't it hold so true that you see the left wingers and their corrupting policy? It's not pushed just on the general public. It's not pushed on the grandmas and grandpas of the world.
yeah.
It's pushed on the young people. It's pushed in schools, in colleges, in universities, all over. You can't go to a single university these days, it seems, without getting some kind of left wing what we might call propaganda shoved down your throat.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting about his Richard Nixon's insight just on so many, like he's just so good at just making little comments that are so thought provoking almost. Just about things like that. I mean, just really hammering, because a lot at that time, a lot of the conservatives, they weren't very combative on the culture war issues. During the 70s, it seems like 60s and 70s, they weren't really that combative on issues like drug use or abortion or except really for the most part until Ronald Reagan. You had Richard Nixon. He was the champion of middle America, and with talking about these important cultural issues, things like the hippies and rising drug usage and crime and stuff. So I think Richard Nixon really was a almost a spokesperson, for the not necessarily just conservatives, but just your average. This is kind of a cliche term at this point, but average Mr. and Mrs. America that are just concerned about just the smut that was being infused into society, by Hollywood, by the academia, and by other institutions like that. So I think,
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that Nixon's very very good film Elvis and Nixon. Check it out.
mm,
Tremendous film. But I think it really shows, when Nixon did meet with Elvis, very historic event. Uh, they discuss things such as the way that the youth is turning in modern America, and the whole reason that Elvis went to seek out the president is because he didn't like the way that the young people were turning. because they were turning to things like drugs and protests
Mm,
and just a general distrust of authority and their even their own parents.
yeah.
And all of that was throwing America out of whack. America since the beginning, and really there was a strong push for it in the 40s and 50s. America is a family oriented country. We're a country that is built on the general family structure, the nuclear family. We're built on, a mom and a dad and, two, three, four kids.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the that's the kind of family that America should have.
Hmm. Yeah, no, Nixon really understood. And in one of his later books, the Beyond Peace, actually, it mostly talks about foreign policy, but at the end he starts talking about domestic policies. And he was concerned just with the decline, the decline of American culture. Because he wrote this in 1994, Beyond Peace. And so by that time, things were even a lot worse than they were, while he was president. And he really was concerned about just the lack of, respect for traditional institutions like family and church and things like that. The rise in you know, out of wed births, things like that. Things like abortion. Things like drug usage and crime, which are caused a large part by a dysfunctional family structure that we're starting to see in a lot of urban areas and rural areas. Uh, he really was concerned about that. But another thing I think is interesting, COVID, is that is that he literally called his welfare reform plan the family assistance plan. And so he just really, even with concrete policy, he really did have a concern for the family structure in America.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that Nixon was just so ahead of the curve on, one could say. He recognized the importance of the family structure, and with the distrust of authority and of parents, like I mentioned just a bit ago, with the distrust, and one could even say hatred of such institutions as just your own parents. With things like that, it was tearing down the moral American structure. And Nixon, ahead of the curve on it, he recognized that these kinds of things were just absolutely destructive to America, because these are the things that America's built on is Christian morality, Christian families, moral families. It all fits together so well, and that's really what makes America run as well as it has been since the 40s and the 50s, and really the even since the founding of America, because you didn't have these dysfunctional, broken families coming over on the Mayflower and
Yeah.
fighting the Revolutionary War.
Yeah. No, it's always every single civilization in all of history that's been successful. The success started in with the family structure, that they had strong families. You had fathers that were, strong and were productive and would, raise their children, in the right way in the traditions of that society and carry them on. And then you have mothers that would, a child, bear children and serve as a good companion, to the husband and, help raise the family. And that's how we've organized Western civilization for the longest time. And it's worked very well. I mean, up until just a couple decades ago, really just until this decade, Western civilization was on top of the game. I mean, for the most part, at least compared to other places like China and stuff. But we're starting to lose that, and it really directly correlates, at least like on the graph, with the decline of the. Let me say this: Western civilization's power, compared to stuff like China and stuff. When you've seen the decline of the Western family unit, you've seen our decline in our economic power, and our political influence, it's all connected with the family. And Nixon understood that. Nixon really, in his book Beyond Peace that I have here, good book recommendation, by the way, if you're wanting to read, to you and to the viewers.
Yeah, of course.
He was really concerned also about, like, he didn't want to regulate Hollywood because he didn't think government needed. But anyways, but he was deeply concerned with just the lack of respect for promoting family values that Hollywood had, as opposed to them just wanting to get a quick buck, or even maybe a more darker agenda of wanting to actually shift the cultural views of the nation. But Nixon really understood that Hollywood was posing a very big problem to America's families, and a lot of just the I think he uses the word smut, but just filth. You just turn on the TV and it's nothing that's ever gonna during the 40s, especially the 40s, but 40s and 50s, TV was, you could get good influence from a lot of those shows, like Little House on the Prairie, or a lot of the wartime, cartoons or stuff like that. They were promoting, sometimes even Christian values, but at the very least, just, American values of being a good,
American patriotic values, teaching the kids to appreciate where they're growing up.
Exactly. Now it's anything but that, really, that we're seeing from Hollywood. But Nixon was ahead, and I think Nixon really was ahead of the curve that I see on people like Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan, because they were just, at least with Ronald Reagan in practice, I think in some of his rhetoric he was okay, but in practice, both of those two, Barry Goldwater and Ronald Reagan, they were not too concerned, at least with practice, with cultural issues. They didn't really seem to really care how American families are doing, as long as the, and I still like them for their own respective reasons. On that issue of family issues, they really do seem to be kind of lacking, and that's why I think Richard Nixon is really a better role model for the conservative movement, as opposed to those two, or a lot of
absolutely
other politicians. Just because because the family unit is the most important part, as we've said, of a productive, prosperous society. Not just economically prosperous, but emotionally, psychologically, so many other things. And a lot of experts agree that, you can show studies that, having a strong family unit, people tend out, to be better when they have, a mom and a dad and a safe household.
Absolutely. And I think that, looking at people like Ronald Reagan and Barry Goldwater, not to, slight them or anything.
I'm not trying to diss them, but
yeah, of course. But you have to take into consideration Barry Goldwater, when he was running for president, America wasn't up in arms against the Vietnam War, and when Ronald Reagan was running for president, sure, we weren't in the greatest of times coming out of the Carter administration. We weren't in the greatest of times, but we were at least united against communism.
Yeah.
But when Nixon was running for president, people were up in arms against the Vietnam War. There were protests and hippies and all these different things destroying the family unit. And I do think that contributed to his perhaps ahead of the curve views on preserving the family, because the distrust and all that led to destruction of families, and that definitely could have contributed, and I believe did contribute to his very, very strong Christian moral views on the family, which we see holding up today.
Nixon, and people don't like to talk about this, Nixon was dealt a very terrible hand of cards from LBJ. Out of control spending, rapidly growingly unpopular foreign policy, and basically disastrous war effort in Vietnam. But I think I mentioned the inflation. With the budget that was out of control, and out of controllably growing welfare state that it seemed like there's no end to the growth in sight. And so a lot of these things, so Nixon really, and also a hostile Congress for most of his presidency, and a very hostile media. And so being dealt those hands of cards for Nixon, to me, to have performed the way that he didn't have accomplished, as much as he accomplished, which was a lot. And then just to say that, all that's, uh, invalid now because, of one thing that some lower level, campaign people did. That really wasn't that bad if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, you look at LBJ, his campaign,
I was gonna
absolutely.
get into that. Also, the
Yeah.
moral standards that were set for the White House were very low by the time. When you look at FDR, what he would use, the CIA for, or I mean the FBI, or you look
Mhm.
at what LBJ would do with wiretapping people, or John F. Kennedy literally wiretapped Nixon
Mhm.
while while JFK was president, and so all those things, the Nixon administration, there was no good examples from the presidency since Eisenhower, really. So you have FDR, you have John F. Kennedy, and you have LBJ setting very terrible examples for how a president should operate himself morally, and then just, the, I guess, bounds of political civility. Those didn't exist in,
Mhm.
the in the White Houses of, FDR. I mean, they would do stuff to win. Like, they didn't care really if it was legal or not. I mean, if it would advance their agenda, they would do it. And so I feel
Mhm.
like Nixon kind of just had this idea that, well, if the Democrats, three Democrat presidents, very blatantly break the law, okay, to get stuff done, and then also on top of that, face no repercussion whatsoever, not from the media, not from law enforcement, nothing. I think that, not Nixon himself, obviously, because he wasn't involved with Watergate, but that the people working for Nixon just felt like they could just, wasn't going to be a big deal. And LBJ even said that this Watergate stuff wasn't going to hurt Nixon, because no one really thought at first that it was going to hurt Nixon, but then they just
Mhm.
kept on pushing and pushing and pushing. And so I think with the Watergate stuff, if you didn't have FDR and John F. Kennedy and LBJ do the stuff that they did and that they knew about, I don't think you would have seen Watergate happen.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No. Uh, Going back to like setting a good example, when you go back to the Eisenhower administration, who was vice president under Eisenhower, Richard Nixon, who was heading up a vast majority of the post World War II, like directly after World War II had concluded, and all these nations are trying to put themselves back together. Who was heading up the foreign diplomacy?
Yeah.
Richard Nixon. He was kind of the knight in shining armor to all these all these foreign nations, places like China, who in modern history aren't really seen as big players in World War II, and from smaller players like China all the way up to places like France.
Yeah.
You know, Nixon, uh, I believe it was France, showing up and being treated like a king. They recognized him, and they said to themselves, "This is the guy. This is the guy who's helping out. This is the guy
Yeah.
who's, making a difference, not just for America, but recognizing the needs of other countries and correlating those with the American needs."
No, when that's a great point. When the Korean War was going on, and Douglas MacArthur wanted to open it up to liberating. Let's go back even further. When the Chinese Civil War was going on, okay, and you had Democratic President Harry Truman. A lot of the Democrats in the State Department at the time were communist sympathizers, because this is before the Cold War really, really heated up.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the Democrats in the State Department, so they were advising Harry Truman not to intervene. This is why we didn't get involved in China during the Chinese Civil War. They were advising Harry Truman not to intervene on behalf of the nationalists, despite them being our allies during, World War II. They'd point out, human rights abuses or whatever communist propaganda they could get on Chiang
Mhm.
Kai-shek. But Chiang Kai-shek was a real American ally. He was a Christian. He was a capitalist. He was a nationalist. I mean, he was really and he led to democracy in Taiwan. And
Mhm.
so what we did to him, to me, was the total betrayal of an ally. But anyways, Richard Nixon, I think he was in Congress at the time, he opposed what Harry Truman was doing. He thought we should have been giving way more support, to the. I mean, there's no reason that we let China become communist. We could have stopped it if we wanted to, the same way that the Soviets were, giving tons of aid and weapons and money to the communists in China. We were not doing the same for the nationalists. And that was just the weakness of the. So Nixon would actually attack Harry Truman about this. He had this phrase, I forgot what it was, uh, but he really used, the fall of China against the Democrats. So Nixon understood that we had to be very resilient against the communist threat in Asia and in Europe and at home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Nixon wasn't just this guy to go out, oh, they're communist right off the bat. We're gonna try to wipe them off the
Yeah.
face of the earth,
Mhm.
wipe them off the map. He wasn't that kind of guy. He was uh, in his vice presidency and during his presidency, between the two of those, he really pushed for diplomacy. He wasn't the kind of guy to reach out with violence first, but instead to try to establish diplomatic relations and try to handle things reasonably.
The Nixon foreign policy to me, and I don't agree with every single thing that he did, but from I guess an ideological perspective, I would say it's a very good foreign policy. It's we can still be involved in the world with our diplomacy because America holds a lot of diplomatic power. We can negotiate with countries to get uh, things done that meet our interests and our values. But what we shouldn't do, and this is what Nixon understood, is that we can't be the policeman of the world. We can't militarily intervene every single time a country does something that's mean to another country or mean to its own people. We don't have the ability to do it. It's on our responsibility to do that every single time. And I think Nixon understood that there was room for some intervention if it's if our interests or if there's a massive if you have like a Hitler like situation again or something like that, then sure we can do something to stop it. But when it comes to these endless wars in the Middle East, Nixon, in my opinion, definitely would, based on how he conducted himself as a politician and stuff he's written on, would definitely have opposed these endless wars in the Middle East, just staying in Afghanistan for 20 years. I don't think he wouldn't have. I don't think he would have supported that because he didn't believe America should be the policeman of the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. He knew and recognized that the leader of a country is not beholden to the leaders of other countries, but to the people who elected him.
Yeah.
He recognized that the person sitting in the Oval Office, he's not the president of the world. He's not the president of the right-leaning countries. He's not the president of all democratic countries. He's the president of America and only America. And because of that, he has to put American values and American tradition, American society, and above all, the American people first.
Exactly. Nixon really, when people don't like to think about this, Nixon was America first almost in a Trumpian sense. So it wasn't that we have no, we become just completely isolationist, like we become like a hermit, like North Korea is or something like that. But it's that we just recognize that whenever we're interacting with other countries, that we need to have our interests and our values in mind. So we're not just, like I said, no more endless war. That's something that Nixon would have agreed. Nixon didn't want endless war. Nixon ended the Vietnam War within his presidency. It was only going on for, he ended it within four years because within 4 years.
About that, yeah.
He ended it in the first year of his second term. So I guess 5 years. So he ended a war in 5 years. That's a pretty good, compared to a lot of our recent presidents, that's a pretty good track record for world peace. And with what he did with the Soviet Union, I think was a good thing. Also, he remained firm. He wanted America to have a strong military. He wasn't just going to give up everything to the Soviets, but he was willing to negotiate with them and talk, just sit down and talk instead of sending troops out to die. And I think that's a really good foreign policy that he had.
Yeah, absolutely. He recognized that, the what is it? The common saying back then that we shouldn't be fighting another man's war.
Yeah.
Putting, American soldiers aren't just aren't just
Bonds.
soldiers.
Yeah.
They're men and women. Well, I suppose just men back then, but men with families, men who matter to someone,
Yeah.
not just pawns to be moved around on a chessboard.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to wrap this video up. I just wanted to show something real quickly. I have a big collection of antique campaign pins. And so obviously being the Nixon fan that I am, I have quite a few Nixon pins. You see, actually, I just have all of them in a bag here. So they're all it's neat stuff. You know, being a Nixon fan, you get some neat merch, I guess. He had nice
Yeah.
merch. This is a good one. I love this design. Right there. Got Nixon and Agnew. You got two
Very
Republican elephants,
nice.
a star, 1968. You know, so
Very
good
nice.
stuff. Good stuff. Well, August, thank you for coming on to the Schneier Show.
It's been my pleasure. It's
Been
been
an
my
honor to
pleasure.
have you on talking about, you know, the great President Richard Nixon. I think we really did a good job at discussing the ideals behind him. That was the purpose of this video. I would say this is probably one of the most on topic videos I've been on. Like I just
Yeah.
didn't veer. Last video I kind of veered off. I don't know if if you saw. I kind of
Bits and pieces,
bits
bits and
and pieces.
pieces.
I veered. We went off topic in that one. So this one we kept it on right on track. So thank you for coming on. And then to the watchers, thank you for watching this video. Just remember, Richard Nixon, pretty based. Please like this video. Please subscribe. Please share. And like always, have an amazing day. Thank you.